She was a rising global star. He was the face of a rising revolution in Africa. When Halle Bailey picked up the phone to call President Ibrahim Traoré, she thought she was offering help. But what she got was a lesson that would change her entire view of the world. This is not a story about fame. It's a story about listening, humility, and one phone call that shook everything she thought she knew about Africa. Halle Bailey sat alone in her Los Angeles apartment, the evening sun casting long shadows across her living room. Her phone trembled slightly in her hand as she stared at the number on the screen, an international line to Burkina Faso. She took a deep breath and pressed call. When the line connected, she spoke gently. "Hello, President Traoré. This is Halle Bailey. I've been following your work, and I just wanted to speak with you, if you have a moment." Her voice was sincere, laced with nervous determination. "President Traoré, I've followed your work from afar," she began. "I used to think I understood what Africa needed. Charity, attention, celebrity spotlight. But after what I've seen and learned, I realized I had it backwards. That's why I wanted to speak with you." There was a pause on the line. Traoré listened quietly, then said in a calm tone, "Understanding begins with humility, Miss Bailey. Most don't even get that far." Halle took a deep breath. "I used to partner with organizations that told me they were saving lives in Africa. But when I visited a village in Ghana last year, I met young women who said they felt invisible in those projects, used for photos, but never truly heard. It broke me." Traoré's voice came through steady. "That story is too common. Our people don't need saving. They need space. They need respect. And sometimes they need the world to step aside and let us lead." Halle paused, then said softly, "That's why I'm calling. I don't want to be another outsider with good intentions, but no real understanding. I want to learn to support, not to speak over. But I don't know where to begin." Traoré responded with calm resolve. "You've already begun by asking, not assuming. Real partnership starts with humility. If you're serious, then come to Burkina Faso. Sit with our people. Listen before you act." There was a moment of silence on the line. Then Halle replied, "I will. Not as a celebrity making headlines, but as a learner. If there's one thing this journey has taught me, it's that showing up quietly can be more powerful than showing off loudly." Traoré gave a slight chuckle. "Then you're already ahead of many. Our stories don't need rescuing. They need truth. And sometimes the most radical thing a person with power can do is to listen." Halle's voice grew firmer. "Then let's do this differently. No photo ops. No press tours. Just conversations. I want to meet the women leading health initiatives, the farmers adapting to climate change, the students dreaming of change." Traoré nodded on the other end. "We'll arrange it. You'll see not a continent waiting to be saved, but one already rising. Bring your curiosity. Leave your spotlight." The call was coming to an end, but something had shifted. Halle paused, then said, "President Traoré, thank you for your honesty, for trusting me with the truth." Traoré responded with calm resolve. "It's not about trust, Halle. It's about responsibility. If you carry influence, carry it with humility. Africa doesn't need a voice, it needs a microphone." And with that, the call ended. But the conversation had only just begun. Later that night, Halle sat alone, phone in hand, replaying the conversation in her mind. The words, "bring your curiosity, leave your spotlight," echoed louder than any applause she'd ever heard. She opened a blank notebook and wrote just one sentence. "Start by listening." For the first time, she wasn't planning a campaign. She was planning a conversation. Weeks later, Halle quietly arrived in Burkina Faso. No press, no entourage, no announcements. She sat in community halls, listened to women talk about gold, hunger, and hope. She visited schools, clinics, and farms, not to pose for photos, but to understand. She wasn't the star of these moments. The spotlight stayed where it belonged, on the people whose voices had gone unheard for too long. One afternoon, during a quiet visit to a rural village, an elder woman offered Halle a seat beside her. They didn't share a language, but through gestures, smiles, and silence, a connection formed. No cameras, no speeches, just presence. That evening, Haley wrote in her journal, "This is what Traoré meant. Change doesn't start on stage. It starts in silence, with humility." When Haley returned to Los Angeles, she didn't rush to post photos or release statements. Instead, she spent months working behind the scenes, funding local initiatives, connecting African creators with global platforms, and quietly stepping back when her presence wasn't needed. She began turning down projects that used Africa as a backdrop and started championing those that put African voices at the center. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't trending, but it was real. Months later, during a panel in New York, Haley was asked what inspired the shift in her activism. She paused and said simply, "A man named Ibrahim Traoré reminded me that listening is more powerful than speaking, that Africa doesn't need saving, it needs to be heard." The room fell quiet, not with awe, but with understanding. For once, the spotlight didn't shine on her. It pointed outward, toward the people whose stories had too long been told without their voices. The impact of that phone call rippled far beyond their conversation. Haley's fans noticed the change, not just in her causes, but in her confidence, her clarity, and her humility. Other celebrities reached out, curious about her transformation. Some followed her lead, while others dismissed it. But Haley no longer needed applause. Her measure of success had changed, from viral posts to village programs, from headlines to healed communities. President Traoré, too, felt the shift. The world had begun to notice Burkina Faso not just for its challenges, but for its ideas, for its resilience, its innovation, and its leadership. And while he still faced criticism and political pressure, he now had unexpected allies, voices from across the ocean who were no longer speaking for Africa, but standing beside it. Months later, Haley visited Burkina Faso, not with cameras or an entourage, but with a notebook and open ears. She met community leaders, students, and health workers. She listened more than she spoke. And in a quiet village school, a teacher introduced her to a mural painted by children. In its center was a golden map of Africa, and above it, in bold letters, "Don't save us, hear us." As Haley stood before the mural, she thought of Aissata, the little girl whose story had sparked a movement, whose voice had never been recorded but had echoed through so many lives. She thought of that phone call, the courage it took to admit what she didn't know, and the power of listening. That moment became her turning point, not just as a public figure, but as a human being. When she returned to the U.S., Haley didn't launch a new foundation or headline any charity galas. Instead, she used her platform to highlight African-led initiatives, redirecting media attention to grassroots leaders. She gave interviews not to speak, but to introduce others. And whenever someone asked her what changed her, she smiled and replied, "A phone call and the courage to listen." In the years that followed, the ripple effects of that call grew wider. More celebrities began reaching out, not to ask how they could help, but how they could listen. More African filmmakers told their stories. More students in Gorum studied under solar-powered lights built by local engineers. And through it all, the quiet message endured. True partnership begins not with a spotlight, but with humility. Sometimes, Haley would replay that call in her mind, the moment President Traoré challenged her not with judgment, but with honesty. She remembered the silence that followed, the discomfort, the realization. And she knew that was the moment everything shifted, not just for her, but for every life her changed mindset would quietly touch. There was a pause on the line, quiet but not awkward, just the sound of two people sitting with the weight of truth. Finally, Traoré spoke, his voice softer now. "You've seen it yourself. Real change doesn't come from fame or funding alone. It comes from listening, truly listening, to the people whose lives are at stake." Haley nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "That's why I called," she said. "I want to listen. I want to learn. And I want to know how to support without overshadowing." Traoré replied with quiet conviction. "Then start with humility. Speak less. Create space. Find those on the ground doing the work. And ask them what they need, not what you think they need." Haley absorbed every word. "And when the cameras come?" she asked. "Let them capture the voices that have never been heard," Traoré said. Use your spotlight not to be seen, but to illuminate others. The call ended not with promises or photo ops, but with something far more powerful, a mutual respect and a shared commitment to a different kind of activism, one rooted in partnership, not performance. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe